You journaled. You cried. You forgave. You thought you did the work. You faced your shadow, looked at your wounds, said the hard truths, felt the feelings you've been avoiding for decades. But now, nothing feels the same. The silence isn't peaceful. It's hollow, like standing in a house where all the furniture has been removed, and you can hear your own footsteps echoing in rooms that used to feel like home. You thought facing your shadow meant you'd feel free, lighter, more yourself. But maybe this silence is the real test. Maybe the real question isn't, can you face your darkness? It's, can you live when you're no longer the same person and you don't even know who you are? When the masks are gone, when the stories you told yourself about who you were have crumbled, when you're left with what exactly? This is where most people stop. This is where they say shadow work didn't work. But what if this emptiness isn't the end of your healing, but the beginning of your becoming? Most people believe that doing shadow work is a one-time ritual, a catharsis, a release, a transformation. You go in broken, you come out whole, you check the box marked, healed, and move on with your life, finally free from the weight of your past. But shadow work isn't a finish line. It's a crack into a deeper reality, where everything familiar dissolves, where the foundations you built your entire identity on start to shake. Not because you did it wrong, but because now nothing wrong fits anymore. You're not healing from a wound. You're not recovering from trauma. You're not fixing what was broken. You're letting go of the self who thought pain was identity. The self who believed suffering made you special. Who wore trauma like armor, like proof that you'd survive something significant. The self who needed to be damaged in order to feel real. And when that identity dissolves, what's left? Carl Jung called this process individuation. The journey toward becoming who you truly are, beneath all the roles and masks and survival strategies you've accumulated over the years. But he never said it would be comfortable. He never said you'd recognize yourself when you got there. He never promised that integration would feel like relief. Jung understood something most modern healing approaches miss. The ego doesn't just resist healing. It resists disappearing. And integration isn't about strengthening the ego. It's about learning to live without it being in charge. If you're sitting in this strange emptiness after your breakthrough, you're not broken. You're not doing anything wrong. You haven't failed at healing. You're between selves. You're in the space where the old you has died, but the new you hasn't been born yet. And that's the most terrifying and sacred place to be. Most people run from this space. They try to rebuild their old life faster. They grasp for familiar patterns, even if those patterns were killing them, because the known hell feels safer than the unknown heaven. But if you're here listening to this, part of you is ready to stay in the void a little longer. Part of you is ready to discover what lives beneath the story you've been telling about yourself your entire life. It starts quietly. You lose interest in things that once defined you. The job that used to give you purpose feels like you're sleepwalking through someone else's dream. Conversations feel shallow. Goals feel meaningless. Even joy feels suspicious, like you're betraying some deeper truth by being happy. The clothes in your closet look like costumes. The friends who knew the old you start to feel like strangers. Your own reflection looks unfamiliar. People notice. They ask if you're okay, if you need help, if you're depressed. And you can't explain that you're not depressed. You're not having a breakdown. You're having a quiet collapse. The collapse of everything you thought you needed to be in order to be loved. Pause here if this hits something in you. Take a breath. Is this what you've been carrying all along? The weight of being someone you're not? The shadow didn't just show you your pain. It didn't just reveal your wounds or your trauma or your unprocessed grief. It revealed how much of your life was built on avoiding rejection, on trying to be lovable, palatable, harmless, the perfect child who never caused problems, the reliable friend who was always available, the agreeable partner who never had needs that were inconvenient. You performed your way through decades, thinking that was just life, thinking that's what love required, thinking that's what success meant. You learned to read rooms like a survival skill, to shape-shift based on who needed what from you, to disappear parts of yourself that might be too much, too intense, too real. But now that you see the performance, how do you live differently? How do you show up authentically when you're not even sure who you are without the mask? And that's where most people give up. They call it burnout, or relapse, or needing a break from growth. They say things like, I tried therapy, but it made me worse. Or, I was happier before I knew all this stuff about myself. But the truth? You're not relapsing. You're not getting worse. You're finally without the mask. And that's terrifying. Sarah was 29 when she first encountered her shadow during what should have been a routine therapy session about work stress. She was describing her weekend, how she'd said yes to brunch with friends she didn't really enjoy, helped her neighbor move furniture, attended her cousin's baby shower, all while feeling exhausted and resentful. Why do you say yes to things you don't want to do? Her therapist asked. The question hit like a physical blow. Sarah started crying, not sad tears, but angry ones. Because if I don't, she said, shocking herself with the venom in her voice, they won't need me anymore. And if they don't need me, they won't want me. And if they don't want me, she couldn't finish the sentence. But she didn't need to. The shadow work that followed was brutal. Sarah discovered layers of people-pleasing that went back to childhood, when love felt conditional on being helpful, agreeable, easy. She thought the hard part was over when she finally understood her patterns. But then came the real challenge, living differently. Sarah was a people-pleaser who said yes to everything. Until one evening when she finally exploded at her best friend during a dinner that was supposed to be fun. I don't want to be here, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I don't want to pretend I care about your dating drama when my life is falling apart. And I can't tell you because you never ask. You never ask about me. You just take. The friend left. Sarah sat alone with her untouched appetizer, feeling like she'd just murdered her old self. 4 months after, Sarah felt like a stranger in her own life. Work projects she used to complete perfectly now felt pointless. Her apartment, once decorated to impress visitors, felt like a stage set for a play she no longer wanted to perform. She stopped answering texts immediately, stopped volunteering for extra work, stopped asking how everyone else was doing before sharing how she was doing. She wasn't depressed. She was disoriented, like waking up in a house you thought was yours, only to realize you've been house-sitting for someone else your entire life. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the grief or even the loneliness. The hardest part was the guilt. The guilt of disappointing people who had come to expect her endless availability. The guilt of setting boundaries with people who had never been asked to respect boundaries before. The guilt of taking up space with her own needs, her own feelings, her own life. This disorientation isn't pathology. It's not something to fix or medicate or therapy away. Jung called this phase the transcendent function, the bridge between your old unconscious patterns and your emerging authentic self. But bridges are terrifying places to live. You can see where you came from. You can glimpse where you're going, but you can't go back, and you don't know how to move forward. So you just wait in the space between who you were and who you're becoming. This waiting is sacred work. Even though it feels like nothing is happening, even though it feels like you're stuck, Jung understood that transformation isn't linear. It's not a straight line from broken to healed. It's more like a spiral. You circle around the same issues, but each time from a deeper place of understanding. The transcendent function is your psyche's way of creating a bridge between opposites, between the conscious and unconscious, between who you've been and who you're becoming, between the self that needed to perform love and the self that is love. Here's something to sit with. What part of your old life are you mourning? Write it down, not to fix it, just to honor what you're letting go of. Because even the parts of yourself that were survival strategies deserved love. They kept you safe when you didn't know how to keep yourself safe. Maybe you're mourning the version of yourself who tried so hard to be perfect, who believed that if you could just be good enough, smart enough, helpful enough, you'd finally be safe. Maybe you're mourning the innocence of believing that other people's approval could fill the void inside you. The hope that external validation could make you feel worthy. Maybe you're mourning the simplicity of not knowing how much you were performing, when a mask felt like your face and you didn't have to carry the weight of consciousness about your own patterns. Here's where it gets dangerous. The ego, the part of you that needs to be somebody special, somebody significant, somebody worthy, doesn't just disappear when you do shadow work. It gets creative. It evolves. It adapts. It survives. It returns dressed in spirituality, in healing language, in self-awareness buzzwords. It whispers, now be perfect, be healed, be the person who's done the work, be an inspiration, be proof that growth is possible, be the one who turned their pain into purpose, be light, be love, be enlightened. But that's just another performance, another mask, another way to avoid the terrifying ordeal of being ordinary, of being human. Carl Jung warned about this in his later writings. He said, "The shadow is not meant to be erased. It's meant to be integrated. You are not here to become light. You're not here to transcend your humanity. You're here to become whole. Whole enough to carry grief, rage, softness, and wisdom all at once. Whole enough to be contradictory, complex, still learning. Whole enough to be human. If this part feels like a mirror, keep going. The next few minutes might shake something loose that's been waiting to be seen. Something about the ways you've been trying to earn your worth through healing. The spiritual ego is seductive because it feels evolved. It feels like progress. It posts quotes about healing on social media. It speaks in therapy language at dinner parties. It gives advice to friends who are struggling. It performs enlightenment. It performs wisdom. It performs integration. It turns your healing into content, your growth into a brand, your shadow work into a qualification for dispensing wisdom to others. It whispers, look how far you've come. Look how much you understand now. Surely this gives you the right to guide others. But integration isn't a performance. It's not something you achieve or complete or graduate from. It's not a credential that qualifies you to heal others. It's not a badge that proves your superiority over those still struggling. It's the quiet, unglamorous work of learning to be human without apologizing for it. It's saying, I don't know without shame. It's feeling angry without making it mean you're unhealed. It's loving someone without needing them to love you back in a specific way. It's being triggered without immediately launching into a speech about your triggers. It's having a bad day without turning it into a lesson about the spiritual significance of bad days. It's being imperfect without needing to perform self-compassion about your imperfection. Michael spent 2 years in therapy, working through childhood trauma with a therapist who specialized in attachment issues and family systems. He learned about his anxious attachment style. He did EMDR for his developmental trauma. He practiced inner child work and somatic experiencing. He felt proud. Finally, he was someone who did the work, someone who was self-aware, someone who understood his patterns. He started giving his friends advice, recommending books, talking about triggers and boundaries and nervous system regulation. When friends came to him with problems, he had frameworks to offer, language to give them, insights about their unconscious patterns. His friends started coming to him for support. They called him wise, emotionally intelligent, someone who really understood human psychology. He felt useful, important, special, until one day, his brother called him out. They were sitting in Michael's living room after their father's funeral. Their dad had been an alcoholic, distant, critical, sometimes cruel. Michael had done years of work around this relationship. His brother was crying, not processing, not analyzing, just grieving. I keep thinking about that time he took us fishing, his brother said through tears. Remember? I was maybe 8. He was sober that day. He taught me how to cast a line. Michael felt his therapeutic training kick in. That's really beautiful that you're connecting with a positive memory, he said. It sounds like you're able to hold the complexity of who he was, the good and the bad. His brother looked at him with something that might have been discussed. You talk about healing like it's a degree you earned, his brother said quietly. But you still can't sit with me when I'm struggling without trying to fix me. You still need to be the wise one, the one who has it figured out. Michael felt something crack open in his chest. I just want to miss my dad, his brother continued. I don't need to understand it or integrate it or make meaning from it right now. I just want to feel sad about losing him. Michael realized he hadn't been present for his brother's grief. He'd been present for his own need to be the healer. All his healing had become another way to be special, to be needed, to avoid his own ordinary, ongoing humanity. He realized he'd been performing recovery instead of living it, performing wisdom instead of simply being present. The spiritual ego had convinced him that his healing made him qualified to heal others, that his self-awareness made him responsible for other people's awareness, that his integration meant he was supposed to be above, different, better. In that moment, sitting with his brother's raw grief, Michael saw how his healing had become another form of armor, another way to avoid vulnerability. He turned his therapy breakthroughs into credentials, his emotional intelligence into a hierarchy where he was at the top. But real integration meant being willing to be wrong, to not know, to sit with someone's pain without needing to fix it or find meaning in it. The transcendent function Jung described isn't about transcending your humanness. It's not about rising above your limitations or becoming enlightened. It's about integrating all the parts you've rejected, including the parts that are flawed, confused, and still learning, including the parts that are sometimes petty, sometimes jealous, sometimes small, including the parts that don't want to be wise all the time, that don't want to find the lesson in every experience. This is the real test after shadow work. Can you be ordinary? Can you be imperfect? Can you be learning without making it a performance? Can you carry your darkness not as shame, but as depth? Not as something to heal, but as something to honor? Can you love yourself without needing to improve yourself? The spiritual ego wants to turn your shadow work into another achievement, another way to be special. But integration asks something much more radical. Can you be nobody special and still love yourself? Can you be flawed and still belong? Can you be human and still worthy? Jung called this the acceptance of the inferior function, the willingness to embrace the parts of yourself that will never be polished, enlightened, or healed. The parts that are just human. Because wholeness isn't about perfection. It's about inclusion. It's about making space for all of who you are, the wise and the foolish, the healed and the healing, the light and the shadow. All of it, without apology. Your old roles? Gone. Your need to be understood by everyone? Fading. The friends who knew the performed version of you? Some of them drift away, and you let them, not out of bitterness, but out of relief. Relief that you no longer have to maintain relationships that required you to be smaller than you are, or larger than you are, or different than you are. You speak less, feel more. Stop explaining yourself to people who aren't asking the right questions. Stop defending your choices to people who weren't there for the process. And in the silence, you begin to notice. You're not empty. You're unwritten. This is the cocoon, not the cage. It's not punishment. It's preparation. Preparation for a way of being that doesn't require constant maintenance, that doesn't need external validation to survive. Take a moment here. How does it feel to imagine not having to be anyone in particular? Just you without the costume, without the story, without the need to be impressive? You stop tolerating things that drain you. Not because you're angry, but because you finally understand your own value. You stop explaining your boundaries. You just live them. You stop giving your time to people who don't see you, your energy to projects that don't align with who you're becoming, your attention to conversations that leave you feeling depleted rather than nourished. People notice. They say you've changed. They say you're different. And you have, but not in the way they think. You haven't become better or worse. You haven't become more spiritual or more successful. You become real. The difference is subtle but profound. Like the difference between a photograph and the actual landscape. Like the difference between describing love and feeling it. Jung wrote about this phase as the return to innocence. Not the innocence of never being hurt, but the innocence of no longer carrying hurt as identity. The innocence of no longer needing your pain to make you special. Your trauma to make you interesting. Your struggles to make you worthy of love. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you no longer tolerate what you once begged to receive. You don't owe anyone access to the depths you've worked so hard to understand. Your healing is not a public service. Your growth is not content for other people's entertainment. Your integration is private, sacred, yours. It belongs to you the way your dreams belong to you, the way your heartbeat belongs to you. Notice what you've stopped explaining lately. What boundaries have you started living instead of negotiating? What parts of your life have become yours again? There's wisdom in what you're protecting now. Notice how different it feels to protect your energy instead of defending your choices. To live your values instead of explaining them. To simply be yourself instead of convincing others that yourself is acceptable. This isn't selfishness. This is stewardship. You're learning to steward your own life with the same care you use to give to managing other people's comfort with who you are. This phase feels lonely sometimes, but it's a different kind of loneliness than the isolation you felt when you were performing for love. This loneliness is spacious, clean, honest. It's the loneliness of no longer needing to be understood by everyone, of no longer needing to be liked by people who don't actually know you, of no longer needing to make yourself smaller so others can feel bigger. It's the loneliness of having space for authentic connection to emerge. It's the loneliness of choosing quality over quantity, depth over breadth, truth over comfort. You realize that most of your previous relationships were based on who you pretended to be, not who you actually are. And while this realization is painful, it's also liberating. Because now you have space for relationships based on reality rather than performance. Because now when someone really sees you, the unperformed, unpolished, real you, it matters. It matters because it's actually you they're seeing, not the version you thought they needed, not the version you hoped would be lovable. Just you, whole, integrated, human, still growing, still learning, still sometimes struggling, still sometimes petty or jealous or afraid, but no longer apologizing for any of it, no longer trying to edit yourself for public consumption. The cocoon phase teaches you something crucial. You're not a project to be completed. You're not a problem to be solved. You're not a wound to be healed. You are a living, breathing, evolving human being who deserves love, not despite your imperfections, but including them. Jung understood this. He never promoted healing as a destination. He promoted it as a way of traveling, a way of moving through the world with increasing honesty, increasing self-compassion, increasing acceptance of the full spectrum of human experience. Integration doesn't mean you stop growing or changing or evolving. It means you stop apologizing for the process. You stop trying to speed it up or skip steps or bypass the difficult parts. You learn to trust your own timing, your own path, your own way of becoming who you are. This trust is radical in a culture that wants to pathologize every difficult emotion, medicalize every period of transition, and monetize every moment of growth. But you learn to sit with uncertainty without immediately reaching for answers. To sit with discomfort without immediately reaching for solutions. To sit with yourself without immediately reaching for improvement. This is the deepest healing. Learning to be with yourself exactly as you are in this moment, without needing to be anywhere else or anyone else. You don't arrive. There's no certificate for completing your shadow work. No graduation from being human. No moment when you can finally say, I'm done. I'm healed. I'm whole. Because wholeness isn't a destination. It's a practice. You rebuild, not as who you were, but as who you never dared to be. The person you are when you're not trying to be anyone. The person you are when you're not performing for love or approval or acceptance. The person you are when you're just here, present, real. And that rebuilding, it's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post quotes or seek applause. It doesn't need witnesses or validation. It walks quietly, chooses deliberately, loves fiercely, but not desperately. If you've made it this far, something in you recognizes this truth. That's not accident. That's your integrated self calling you forward. If these deeper conversations are what your soul has been craving, consider subscribing. There's more where this came from. This is what it means to survive shadow work. Not to escape the darkness, but to carry it with grace. To know that your anger has wisdom, that it's pointing toward what matters to you, that your sadness has depth, that it's the price of loving in a world where loss is inevitable, that your fear has protective instincts, that it's trying to keep you safe even when its methods are outdated. That your joy is earned, not performed. That it comes from being yourself, not from convincing others you're worthy. Jung called this holding the tension of opposites, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, knowing and not knowing, wisdom and humility, confidence and uncertainty, love and boundaries. You become someone who can sit with complexity without needing to resolve it, who can love without controlling the outcome, who can be hurt without making it mean you're broken, who can be healing without needing to be healed, who can be growing without needing to be perfect, who can be human without apologizing for it. This integration changes how you move through the world. You stop rushing to fill silences with explanations. You stop rushing to fix other people's discomfort with your authenticity. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop growing to make others proud. You just are. And somehow, that's enough. It's enough for the people who matter. It's enough for the life you're building. It's enough for the love you're creating. Here's the question Jung never answered directly, but lived beautifully. Who are you when you're no longer trying to be anyone? That person, the one you are when you stop trying, that's who you've been integrating toward all along. That's who is waiting beneath all the masks and performances and attempts to be lovable. That person was never broken. They were just hidden beneath layers of conditioning, hidden beneath years of trying to earn love through being useful, impressive, or easy to be around, hidden beneath the belief that your worth was something you had to prove rather than something you inherently possessed. The integration journey isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to be afraid of your own presence. The silence after shadow work isn't empty. It's pregnant, full of possibility, full of space for who you actually are to emerge. Not who you should be, not who you were, not who others need you to be. Who you are, in all your contradictory, complex, still growing humanity. The you who is wise and foolish, strong and vulnerable, healed and healing. The you who loves deeply and sets boundaries clearly. Who feels everything and apologizes for nothing. The you who is enough, not because you've done the work, but because you exist. And that person, they were worth every moment of darkness you've walked through to find them. Every therapy session, every breakdown, every moment of feeling lost and confused and uncertain. Every time you want to give up on yourself. Every time you wondered if healing was possible. Every time you felt like you were doing it wrong, moving too slowly, not progressing fast enough. It was all worth it to arrive here, to this moment, to this recognition. The real test isn't whether you can face your shadow. The real test is whether you can live as yourself. Integrated, whole, human, still becoming, but no longer apologizing for the process. Still growing, but no longer trying to speed up your own unfolding. Still healing, but no longer treating yourself like something broken. This is the quiet victory of shadow work. Not becoming perfect, becoming real, and learning to love yourself exactly as you are, in all your beautiful, messy, contradictory humanity. The integration continues, one ordinary, extraordinary day at a time, one breath at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of radical self-acceptance at a time. You thought the hard part was facing your shadow, but the real miracle, learning to live in the light as all of who you truly are.